I'm John Thyfault. I'm from the University of Kansas Medical Center, and I'm an organizer for the New Insights into Exercise Biology meeting.
I'm Sue Bodine. I'm a professor of medicine at the University of Iowa Carver College of Medicine, and I'm an organizer for the New Insights into Exercise Biology meeting.
I'm Bret, Goodpaster. I am the scientific director of the Advent Health Translational Research Institute in Orlando, Florida, and also one of the co-organizers of the New Insights into the Biology of Exercise meeting.
Well, I think one of the exciting things that's emerging is that exercise affects various tissues.
Yeah.
And not only that, it affects a lot of tissues that we, largely ignored in the past, but then those tissues communicate with other tissues. And so there's a lot of inter-organ crosstalk. And I think the field will do a lot of things in the future trying to figure out if the exercise effects in certain organs are really directly affecting that tissue, or that tissue is responding to stimuli of some sort from other tissues.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the exciting stuff that's going on right now is the effects of exercise on the brain, and I think that's going to be an emerging area, and how that affects various neurodegenerative diseases. But I think also, this inter-organ crosstalk, the integrative nature of exercise came out in this meeting, and I think that was really positive.
Some of these studies showing that exercise has effects on a variety of tissues at the molecular level too. When you look at transcriptomic profiles, for example, on muscle and adipose and liver, it's amazing how the different tissues respond similarly to exercise. And I think this really speaks to the potential common mechanism or unknown factors that are produced by exercise that we don't yet understand.
Yeah, I think there's, people have been studying exercise for decades, for centuries, as Mark Hargraves pointed out in the keynote. But I think now trying to get at the mechanisms and bringing in the people not outside the field, with the different techniques, the omics techniques, the metabolomics, transcriptomics, proteomics, and trying to put all this together and how different organs are responding. As you said, it was the fact that many of these organs are responding similarly is new and exciting data.
And sort of related to that, I think, is, exercise physiology has traditionally been a study of skeletal muscle responses, and there's good reason for that. But I think, the emerging technology with being able to understand non-muscle cell responses to exercise within muscle tissue, and the technologies, that'll, I think, moving ahead will support that. The single cell, sequencing, transcriptomics, attack-seq methodologies to understand, what's going on in the non-muscle cells or non-adipose cells, I think is really exciting.
We learned about studies looking at exosomes coming out of the liver during exercise that may affect other target tissues and affect glucose homeostasis. And exosomes are known to be packed with proteins and microRNA and other unknown agents that may have effects. We still don't know how they go to a cell, another cell, or another organ and actually exert their benefits, but it seems like that's one thing that's occurring. I think another thing is that exercise changes the metabolome pretty dramatically, and if the cells are sensitive to different changes in the metabolome, that may affect transcription and signaling processes in various tissues just by the metabolome changing, so different metabolites changing is another possible signaling mechanism. Hard to figure out, but I have to think it has to occur. And, obviously there's always been hormonal signals, and there's neuronal signals that we completely don't understand. But for example, you brought up the point of inactivity leads to cognitive decline and loss of skeletal muscle mass. I would have always thought it was the skeletal muscle mass and the brain are not connected, but perhaps there's a connection, a neural connection, innervation of the brain and then of the muscle and then feedback to the brain. It's all connected. So.
Yeah, I think people who have studied muscle have sort of ignored that, muscle has to be activated by the spinal cord has to be activated by upper motor centers. There's sensory feedback from muscle to all these centers, affects the brain, affects the cardiovascular system. And so all of this is interconnected. And so it may be, what's interesting in some of these neurodegenerative diseases, it may be that peripheral effects may be easier to detect early than some of the cognitive deficits and picking that up and being able to then intervene early with exercise or other interventions.
Yeah, and I think all this really speaks to the pluripotent effects of exercise and how it's all
Yeah.
integrated. And when you consider the possibility of exercise mimetics, we hear about AMPK activators, for example, and other compounds that might mimic some of the effects of exercise. It's hard to imagine that, they'll have the pluripotent effects of exercise, or if they have a pluripotent effect, they might not all be positive effects. They have some off-tissue, off-target effects that may not be desirable. So
Yeah. A single pill does not replicate all of exercise's benefits. But
And that's made exercise hard to study, right? Because it activates so many pathways.
Yeah.
And in our reductionist biomedical science community, which is the way the field, most biomedical sciences are, it's hard to study something that activates multiple tissues and multiple levels, but we have to keep trying to do it.
yeah.
And the other profound thing that we found, that was highlighted in a number of talks was that if you are aging and your fitness is higher, you have a lot less of a decline, right?
Yeah.
And if your fitness is lower as you're aging, you have more of a decline. And that also showed up for other outcome measures.
Yeah. Well, it points to, we've had the discussion of, what you do early in life can have profound, as an adolescent and early 20s, and how that can influence your outcomes as you age. And those early events may be really important. And I think that's something we didn't really study. I mean, we didn't have a lot of representation in this meeting, but I think in subsequent meetings, it would be great to have some discussion of that.
Right.
Having a meeting like this where you bring people that are studying different organ systems gets people to start talking to each other and thinking about ways of working together and integrating it. And, people are looking at secreted factors, how something secreted from the liver might be affecting muscle, or vice versa, how secreted factors from muscle might be affecting the brain or other tissues. But
yeah, and I think one of the novel aspects of this meeting, from my perspective, has been, bringing people to the meeting and on the program who do data analysis, bioinformatics.
Yes.
And when you consider all the effects of exercise and all the omics and the technologies that we have, available to look at exercise responses, it's an enormous challenge to analyze all this data. And I think that's, in a nutshell, is a huge challenge for the field moving forward. And we really have to rely on big data, bioinformatics to really help us interpret some of these effects.
Yeah, no, that's going to be a huge challenge.
And I think one of the big things, if you would have had this meeting 10 or 15 years ago, you wouldn't have had as many people here working in different fields to do exercise. There's something that's happened in the last 10 or 15 years where exercise, and I think maybe it's that scientists like to see big effects, and exercise,
it's a huge stress.
It's a big stress that enacts big effects, and I think it's a good way to test different mechanisms and different tools, and by using that as a tool, then they've turned on now to the effects of it, and they want to know more and more and how it connects with other tissues, and it's kind of led us to where we are today, which is really exciting.
Yeah.
Well, I think the analysis of biospecimens as well as the data analysis, it seems to me that it's changing almost weekly. And it's difficult for any one person or investigator to keep up with this. So, this is really requiring a multidisciplinary kind of effort to understand this. It's not just, one investigator in his or her own lab anymore. Doing the studies, analyzing the samples, analyzing the data. And that's really rapidly changed in the past 10 years or so, I think.
Yeah.
Well, what I've noticed at this meeting, there's some very big data sets, and there's people collecting big data sets in different countries, and putting all of that together is going to be another big, huge resource. But just, you have all these various studies going on and trying to assemble all that data and mine it and find out what's in it.
Well, one short talk was on pre-surgery exercise having a profound role on recovery, and I know there's a lot of different fields studying that now, that the fitness level, the physical activity level, the strength of patients before they go into any kind of elective surgery dramatically impacts how fast they recover. In the pain field, I know that there's a lot of evidence that they can start with a low back pain, then it becomes centralized pain, and if they don't do any kind of prehab before the surgery, they have much less success in getting rid of the centralized pain. And I think that's something that is going to grab attention at in the medical community, because it helps them have better outcomes, right? And so it's going to improve profitability and lessen negative outcomes and lead to just lead to better health of their patients. So I think that's something that's going to be moving forward in the future from a lot of our work.
Yeah, and I would say one of the fundamental gaps in this whole field is understanding the biology behavior. This meeting was really more or less focused on, exercise effects, what happens when you actually do exercise, but, why don't some people like to exercise or do exercise, and can we better understand, the biology of brain behavior, or to better understand that?
Is there a genetic predisposition for some people to want to exercise? Or, similar to most addictive behaviors, exercise can be very addictive. And how do we? I think that we all know that exercise is good for you. How do you get people to actually do the activity? Yeah. And engaging in it throughout your lifespan instead of just picking it. You should pick it up at any age, but it needs to be a lifetime activity.
And then another thing that always comes up is, for any kind of specific outcome or disease state, what is the best type of exercise and intensity and duration, and how much? That's what people want to know.
Yeah.
Dosing, how much?
How little do I
How
need
little
to do?
Yeah.
What can I get away
Well,
with?
and we had some data from, the Booth lab and from the Trappy lab that very small amounts of exercise, minute bouts, have profound impact later on.
Well, yeah,
So,
high resistance.
the
that's
high
been-
intensity, very
doesn't
short.
take a whole lot
doesn't
to
take a whole
preserve
lot.
muscle mass.
Yeah, so that's exciting as well.
Yeah, I think many of the studies that we saw presented were focused on linking exercise to metabolic disease risk, insulin resistance, in skeletal muscle, adipose tissue, liver. How does the crosstalk between muscle affect pancreas beta cell function, for example, in diabetes? So a lot of emerging data on that, the tissue crosstalk. So, and again, I think that's where this, multi-omics of multiple biospecimens, big data analysis is really going to help move the field forward in that regard too.
And I think having some old school physiologists involved in all this is important too, right? To understand how all integrates. I'm a little biased, and I think Bret and Sue probably agree with me that I think a lot of the data shows that inactivity is really required for some of these metabolic diseases to occur. So instead of thinking about exercise fixing things, it's really that exercise is necessary for normal health and function, and the lack of it leads to what we have going on in our culture right now. So
I agree completely.
Well, I think one of the things that we heard in the joint symposium was the exercise and heart failure field. That sort of evolved. It used to be in severe heart failure patients, you didn't prescribe exercise, but I think that dogma has really changed or evolved, and even small amounts of exercise in these heart failure patients could be really beneficial. So.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of exchange between the two meetings. I think the joint sessions went really well.
they were well attended.
Well attended. Benefited both audiences.
There's a lot of systemic signals that affect heart metabolism and function, and there's a lot of things that when you change heart function and metabolism, there's a lot of systemic outcomes that occur. So it really links together naturally.
And of course, physical activity and exercise is a potential common link for that, but doesn't potentially explain all of it. So again, unraveling the mechanisms, of why skeletal muscle dysfunction is related to heart failure, I think is really an important area going forward as well.
Yeah, I think also exercise and cancer survivors and all of these drugs that the chemotherapies that they're on, and what they do to cardiovascular fitness and muscle, and the importance of exercise post post therapy. But I think the brain health stuff, brain and exercise field is really interesting.
Yeah.
And that might be something that really motivates people. No one wants to get old and lose cognitive decline, have cognitive decline. So that might be a factor that can really help motivate people to be more active.
Yeah, definitely. Because there are no drugs, right now that are beneficial to any of these diseases.
Right.
And so it's an exciting time for the exercise field, and the fact that this was the first Keystone conference that focused on exercise, and many people who have never been to a Keystone conference attended this for the first time and really liked the venue and
Format.
yeah.
I think you'll get more people from that had never been go to other ones now because
Yeah.
they've been to their first Keystone. So
Yeah, so.
they're always in a beautiful setting. You always get the afternoon off. Most meetings you don't get the afternoon
And
off.
you got an exercise group that can then that
Yeah.
wants to exercise.
I mean, no one wants to sit and watch talks for 8 straight hours from the morning till 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
So you're gonna, yeah.
I mean, the venue, the way the schedule's set up is it allows, or it promotes interactions among people that would not normally interact.
That's true.
And so you have, everybody attends the same sessions, and then you have these
breaks.
big breaks where you can actually interact with people and in settings that you might not normally on the ski slopes
Yeah.
talk to.
And the poster sessions are small enough where you can actually
Yeah.
make it around and talk to different students and different people, where the big meetings, you can't make it to, the posters are just
Yeah.
too difficult.
I think this one in particular really stimulated translational research. You have more molecular biologists interacting with physiologists, and that speaks, I think, to the trainees too, because a postdoc might be in a preclinical sort of molecular biology lab that may want to get more experience with doing human clinical translational research, and they can meet people that do that here.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah. I definitely thank John and Bret for agreeing to be co-organizers. I think, working with the Keystone group it's a professional organization. It was really easy. We got to concentrate on the scientific program, and each step of the way was, very organized, and we knew what we had to do. So,
Really not much more to add. Keystone has been great to work with.
yeah,
Setting up the pre-meeting, meetings with us and discussing, the program and the content, and helping us with the invitation of the speakers. It's been really great.
And I like the active promotion component that you guys do as well. So like the packet you sent with the social media information that was ready to go, that's a really nice tool that no other meetings I know do that. So
yeah.
and I think that's all becoming more and more important. So, but yeah, I'll just highlight what they said. You allowed us to do work on the scientific program, and you took care of everything else, and that's really important to us because we're pretty busy people.
Yeah.
Things can slip through the cracks, so it makes it a lot easier if we have a small task at hand.
Yeah, and you never know. When you put a meeting like this together, you think it's a great program, but it's been really great. We've gotten really positive feedback from everybody, and all the sessions were really strong, and so.
Let's do it again.
Yeah.
Yeah.